Well, welcome to our final lab. So this is just one part of the lab on quantum mechanics. And this is the lab where I ask, what if everything I've taught you, everything you've learned, was actually boron sulfur, right? So really, the question I'm asking with this is, what is your belief system? And it could be the boron sulfur. BS stand for the Bachelor's of Science. That's me as a Nittany Lion. That's where my bachelor's is from. And so this first part of this is I just wanted to talk about 3 myths that I get the privilege to share with you throughout the term. Oh, also BS can stand for, of course, Brussels sprouts, everyone's favorite, once you learn how to cook them correctly. So myth number one that I have elegantly perpetuated is the myth of matter, because it is chemistry, which is the study of matter. And it is the myth that only matter matters, that reality is located in tangible structures of matter. And if you totally believe this myth, that is wonderful. Matter is measured, quantified, and analyzed. Yep, that's how we define matter. And it goes back to Aristotle's empirical materialism, that matter is fixed and unchanging and therefore real. And then Descartes ushered in the scientific revolution, and he introduced the analytical reductive reasoning, and he introduced dualism. Um, so, a quote from him: all science is certain, evident knowledge. We reject all knowledge which is merely probable. And so, we always have, right, oxidation or reduction, the x-axis or the y-axis. So everything was dualistic. And we see so much of that cation or anion. And it then brings us into the mechanistic universe. And so that is based off of all the math back there, which we've gotten to do, that the world can be understood through knowledge of its physical parts. And that's as we keep trying to get more and more knowledge of the smaller and smaller parts that make up everything. This is called a Newtonian clock. And so you can see all the mechanistic parts of it. And because that's what Newton did, is he created the mechanistic universe, that he defined the laws of nature, which is purely materialistic. And of course, we can live in the information age if you like, but reality check, we live in the consumer age, the materialistic age, and that's what it's all about. Um, yeah, and if we have the Newtonian clock, we also have the Newtonian man. And so if that picture doesn't scare you, but that is what medicine does tend to do, which is we're being reduced to our parts. Now, I do want to do a quick disclaimer. Some students are like, yes, absolutely. If we can cure this part, everything else is what it is. And if that's your belief system, then great. You can write a paragraph about that. Or you can continue listening, not asking much, and see where I'm going with this. And hopefully I can spark something. All right, myth number 2 is determinism. And chemical reactions are perfect with this. So every action produces a reaction. We can predict and control the outcome of nature. And we've got a pill for that. Don't worry. Or a vaccine. Or we can change the gene and make it better. You guys are all too young if I started doing for the $6 million man. And myth number 3, reductionism, that we can be reduced to our parts. And so which one is chemistry, right? So we started out the term with, we're made up of solid, liquid, gas, and fire, the transformative, and they're always missing in this picture, but it's actually there because it is the whole picture, the element of ether. So this is a slide from the first slideshow I did for you when I introduced myself. So this is my farewell slides. How small is an atom? So the spider web is a micrometer. So hopefully now that micro symbol is not so foreign to you. And a carbon atom is an angstrom, about 1.5 angstroms. And so the question was, how many carbon atoms can span a spider web? The width, right? 7,000. So go out and look at a spider web when the rain comes back, and you can usually see, and it's amazing, 7,000 atoms would span that. So my question for you now is not for the wow factor, but is that reductionism? Is that determinism? Or is that materialism? Perhaps all three. Even better, we can reduce the spider web to the molecule that makes it up. And 222, we talk about molecules. So this term was a lot about atoms and then chemical compounds, but in next term, we study molecules for the first half, and then we look at the states of matter, and then other special situations. All right. And of course, the periodic table, right? That everything is made of these building blocks. And then we can get into the subatomic. And what we've been talking about, what we started with was atomic theory, that we have the protons and neutrons in the center of the atom, and those electrons. This is a wonderful picture because those electrons, remember, are really acting, they're moving super fast, or they're pulsing. And so are we made up of individual atoms like this Lego guy that we could just rebuild ourselves? Or is there more to it? Which is what quantum mechanics gets into. Another one of the myths is it's in your genes. And this is actually a picture from an article on using nanorobots, molecular robots, to replace defective genes. And so is that materialistic, determinism, or reductionism, that you have a defective gene? Maybe that gene is how it is for a reason. So there's the tarot DNA karma card, right? The thing that's interesting, that it's usually mentioned, but most people don't realize, our DNA, human DNA, only 2% of human DNA actually codes for proteins, is actually genes. 98% is something else. And so it's not the karma, it's the driver. And yeah, this is my hokey picture. But that is a quote, actually not from me, but from this man, Dr. Bruce Lipton, and I can't recommend him enough. And actually the quote at the bottom is from the guy on the next slide. But you are the conductor of your molecular symphony. You determine actually what genes are expressed. And so the quote from Dr. Bruce Lipton there, your perception, it is your perception of any given thing at any given moment can influence your brain chemistry, which in turn affects the environment where your cells reside and controls their fate. Something to think about. So what comes first is the perception, and that then creates this cascade effect. And so that's just me. That's the picture from my YouTube, right? And it's actually from the college, the chem labs. I'm looking at the chem labs, and that's because you've heard me talk about, I've taught a kids class for 10 years, and we'll be teaching it again, possibly before I get to teach you guys in the real lab. Who knows? What signals the release of your genie? So the genie in your genes, the external environment. And so I debated if I wanted to keep this slide in there or not, and I thought it really was. So even though we're not a class about DNA and stuff, we're about atoms and things, this is something I had read many, many decades ago, and then it's been covered up. But the external environment, our friends, our diet, our support system, our beliefs, and our internal milieu, well, that's our thoughts, our feelings, our intentions, our beliefs, our view of God. People believe that God is this like vengeful man sitting on a throne, have very different response to disease. When they looked at AIDS patients, the ones who survived and still are thriving were ones who their view of God was of this benevolent creator, master maker. And so very different viewpoint. The memories we associate with each belief are the tools of our consciousness, the big C word. Each releases a particular cascade of biochemicals, and our body responds with a complex array of shifts. So in 223, it's all about Le Chatelier's principle that everything shifts about. So our genes only contribute to our characteristics. They don't determine them. And that is Dawson Church, who actually is a doctor in psychology. And he and the guy on the previous slide, Bruce Lipton, they're both so cheerful. Every interview I've watched of them, they are just the greatest smiles and laughter. And they both talk about that they were grumpy middle-aged men at one point, and then suddenly they made the shift. And they also made the shift in what they talked about and how they treated their patients and stuff. This is actually from the New England Journal of Medicine, one of the premier medical journals on this planet, from 3 years ago. And it's looking, right, in the 18th century, a person was sick, we gave him a disease, and then we started finding what it was in the organ, and then the cells, and then the microbes, and now we've gotten down to the molecular level, and we have a pill for that. And they actually titled the article Reductionism in Medicine. Is that what you want to be? You can be. And so talking about pills, it's worth talking about the placebo effect. It is real. It is as real as those pills. And if you've never seen these numbers, they're very real. There's something called the file cabinet studies. And it's an extraordinary amount. It's like 75% of studies are never reported because they didn't prove what they wanted to. They actually showed the placebo did as well or better than the drug. And so they're sitting in a file cabinet in boxes. If you ever saw what Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? The Ark is in this big storage place. Yeah, coughs. I remember they actually removed cough medicine off the shelves about 15, 20 years ago. Joey was pretty young. Some of you may not even been born yet, because they actually had shown without a doubt didn't do anything. And within a week, they were back on there because parents were like, yes, they do. Yes, they do. There's alcohol in most cough medicines because the solubility of the medication. And so if the parents believe that it's helping the child then also feels better. Oh, and at the bottom of the slide, there is a comment about the nocebo. And so I keep this slide in here because there's always somebody who comments on this. And so you're just supposed to comment on two of the things that might have struck you. But I had never heard until a couple of years ago about the nocebo. I think I had always intuitively known it. But the nocebo is a term so it comes from the 70s. There was a doctor who treated a man. He got better and he came back. He was feeling ill. And the doctor said, oh, your cancer's back, lung cancer. You have 2 months to live. And the man died 2 days later. And the family asked for an autopsy. And they did an autopsy. They found absolutely no cancer anywhere in his body, none. And the doctor changed his career. He realized his words had put the thought into the man and had killed him. I had a teacher who is my Qigong meditation teacher. She would be 90s now. She was from China and she had terminal breast cancer, stage 4 breast cancer. This would have been in the 70s or 80s. And she was in China. She was good little communist and she was going through all the therapy, but there was no hope. But they don't tell you that in China because of the influence from Taoism and things like that. And so she was at the clinic and this man came in and she's like, what are you doing here? This is for sick people. And he was just beaming health. And he just took her hand and took her to the park and introduced her to his master, his teacher. And she started doing Qigong. And that was 50 years ago. And she's here in this country. She was sent here because her English was very good. And so I had the honor to have her as a teacher 25 years ago. And anyway, this is just a joke that, not a joke, that the placebo effect, it's real, even though people say it's not. And the nocebo, just as real. Be careful of the words you use. And this is a book. So Tristan and some other people have asked me about some books I might recommend. I have not actually read this book, but Dr. Joe Dispenza is another guy. I've read several of his books, can't recommend him enough, or his YouTube. He has wonderful YouTube talks and stuff. So he also is one of those people who had a life-changing event. This is one of my favorite studies I've ever heard of. So there's a place at Stanford called the Heart Math Institute, and they study the heart-mind connection. And so they did a test on people, and so they put monitors. EEG is a brain monitor, and EKG is for the heart. And they've actually found now you don't actually have to put the probes on, that we're giving off the magnetic field, that they can actually put it around, not actually even touching your body for the monitor to work. They also put sensors on the skin to measure sweat and change. And then they had the subjects, staring at a blank computer screen. And every few seconds, an image appears. And they would measure their response. So they either had an emotionally arousing image of like an autopsy, sex, violence, or they had a very calming, such as pictures of nature or individuals smiling. So that's my son, Joey. And they measured the response. And guess the first responder is the heart. The heart responded before there was any brain activity. The heart responded to the image on the computer before the brain had a moment to even realize there was an image on there. It gets even better than that. Both the heart and the brain responded before there was actually an image on the screen. Before even the random image generator in the computer had generated the image at all. So who was generating the image? The computer or the heart? The heart and the brain responded before the computer had made a choice and presented the image. So this gets back to the whole electron double slit thing, that which slit is the electron going to go through? Depends on who the person is who is conducting the experiment. You can look into it. It's been done. It's actually the Air Force has done a lot of studies with this. The body then responded. The body was the last one to respond, which is the skin responses. And so there is, Joe Dispenza talks about this a lot in his books. It's called the heart-mind coherence. So we are in a fluid state of awareness. Prayer and meditation, right, will make you much more coherent. And that inner state of ease and focusing on this moment, that actually gives your heartbeat more variability. So this is looking at somebody when you're in a state of frustration, what your heart rhythm looks like, and somebody who's in a state of appreciation. But if you look at the person in a state of appreciation, those peaks and valleys, they're not like these perfect curves, right? The perfect sine curves. There's variability. And that was actually one of the keys they realized, that the more variability you had, not to the point of frustration, which is just pure chaos there, right? But the more adaptable you are, that you're not fixed in your ways. So variability and opening up to a new way of thinking can always be good. Exploring, allowing your creative to show. This is something else from Joe Dispenza's talks about really well, that humans are the only species that can actually turn on the stress response by thought alone. Every other species needs the actual threat, needs that tiger staring at them, needs, right, the cat and the dog fighting. They actually have to have a physical threat there for the whole stress response to be triggered. We can do it with thought alone. And those pictures there, whether it's anger, whether it's depression, whether it's anxiety, you've all been there, that the mental break that we all need. And it then creates that cascade of molecules, including cortisol, the stress molecule. So got to reduce it down, right? Keep going the reductionist way. And so this is actually a book from Dr. Joe Dispenza that I have, and the CDs that go along, which are meditation CDs. And so he talks about survival versus creation, that you have a choice. And that is the thing that is uniquely human. We have a choice. We have the ability to choose. Keep that in mind. So do you want to be in a survival mentality where you're releasing cortisol? Or do you want to be in a creation mentality where, oh, there we go. Sorry. So that's what I like to think that my brain is looking like, that my mind is blossoming. I do meditations actually involve that, and choosing love is going to keep you always in a creative. I had a yoga teacher who was a little bit on the crazy side, but I kept going to him for several years because he made a comment. Every once in a while, something would come out of his mouth, and I'd be like, "Whoa!" And he made this comment, which is perfect for quantum mechanics, that in every moment there are a trillion potentials. I mean, more than a trillion. We don't have a number for it, but there's a trillion potentials. Find the most loving possibility potential and follow that path, and you will not go astray. Anyway, I also have those guys on there, the little stick figures, because if you want to reduce it to the chemical molecules, oh, we can go there. I can go there very well. And so when we're in creation, it is oxytocin and the endorphins, so collecting and protecting. Or if you're in survival, it is adrenaline and cortisol, so the fight and flight and stress. So are we just molecular chemical factories limited to cause and effect chemical interactions? This is the book. If I had you buy a book, it's probably $500 now. And yeah, you use it for 3 terms. So anyway, there's our book with all the stuff in there, right? We have a pill for that. Those are a representation of our B cells and our immunoglobulin. And that's the idea of the vaccines and stuff. Or are we something much, much more? Like that dissolving into the quantum realm. Yeah, I just like that picture. That's a picture of me spring break 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. Last year, of course, we didn't go anywhere on spring break, but that's up in the Puget Sound. And I've only been there that one time. And actually that pose in yoga, I'm just like showing off for my friend there. But when I first learned it, I could not do it. I spent 10 years trying to do this pose. And I remember the first time I learned it, I came home and I kept trying it and trying it and trying it. And my husband, Pimba, he's like, "What are you trying to do?" And he gets down and he does it right away. And that crazy yoga teacher finally showed me the correct way to do it. It was that nobody else actually was doing it the correct way. And I finally could do it. But so matter is moving around. It was probably also my teacher had that focus that he knew I could do it. And when I finally knew I could do it, I could do it. So matter is electrons moving around matter, the nucleus. But remember that first lecture, 99.99999999999% is empty. Is it empty? Empty is the best word we really have for it. That emptiness, so-called emptiness, is where everything is happening. Well, not everything, just 99.9999%. And so it's the quantum atom that we're talking about. It is the vibrations. So think of it as a pulsing. It's a filled potential. Key is potential, and is your beliefs, your intentions, your words. Greg Braden is another one. Highly recommend him. And so it's a pulsing of that. And then if you want and you study meditation Qigong, then you can play with the pulsing of the fairies and the gnomes. That's in the Redwoods. That was 3 years ago, spring break. All right. Really miss the Redwoods. So can a chemist let go of materialism? Right? We can't just call it the quantum atom. We have to be the quantum mechanical model and talk about it as probability. I like the word potential. Material interactions, blah, blah, blah. Quantum entanglement, you may or may not have heard of this. So the Hubble telescope, everybody's heard of the Hubble telescope. We've seen pictures, people have pictures up like in the science labs from the Hubble telescope. And the Hubble telescope, how it viewed, how we are trained to view the constellations at night, we see everything as separate stars. And that's because we are comfortable with discrete particles to explain our existence, from ions to atoms to molecules. Oh my, to 2 trillion galaxies of stars in a tablespoon of water. Remember that? Avogadro's number. Yeah, there you go. For those of you who like sig figs, you can't actually know the number that precisely. there is another telescope called the Chandra telescope. And that is the same picture, and that's what it saw, that there is a connection. Everything out there, when you're viewing the stars at night, it will be a clear sky again. Realize all the stars have a connection, as does everything in your body, as do all of us. And so that is why part of your lab, one, you get a comment on this. One part is doing the math, one part is writing 2 things from this, and it could have been you ended the video in the first 2 and you're going to just talk to me about materialism and how you love materialism, and that's wonderful. And then the third part of the lab is you get to do a 7-day quantum leap. And so calorie counting is another one. It's all about materialism. How many calories do I have? It's actually the vibrations of your food, how you prepare it, how the person prepares it. That's why processed food is destroying us, because it's not made with loving intent. Start cooking in your kitchen. The chakras, you can meditate on the chakras. So there's a Roy G. Biv. It's in all of us. If you're doing meditation for the 30-day challenge too, for extra credit, keep meditating and you'd have to add that. So it's probably better to do another one. Acupuncture, I have a degree in acupuncture. I've given this a lot of thought. It does work through vibrations, and it also works through the intention of the acupuncturist. And there is in Qigong, there's actually all different sounds. I learned this last year when Corona first happened. I found a YouTube. I'd learned this before, and it profound effect that sound has, because sound has vibrations. So Damon is a musician, and so he would tell you there's the singing bowls, phenomenal. And the giggles are a vibration, definitely. Giggling until you jiggle and wiggle for 7 days. It's amazing. So our DNA, that 98% that's not coding for genes, why is it there in us? Turns out it's a rhythm. There's a symphony in there. There is a pattern. It's pretty awesome. And so the question is, can we change our DNA, reprogram it, and heal ourselves? Can meditation change your DNA? Can giggling and wiggling change your DNA? At least on an epigenetic level. And there's the symphony. All right. The thing that was interesting is the biggest change of all. Gratitude is one, but there is one even bigger, and that was service. So they actually found, this is a study, that's picture Joey when he was 2 in my backyard watering my flowers. There was a study done on depression in the United States and China. And so they took, I don't know how many people, they gave them each, they said for 3 months, you need to go and do what makes you feel good. This is where it gets interesting. After 3 months, people in China were all better, and those in the US were not. And they asked, well, that's interesting. And it was because in the US, they followed it, the directions, and they did what made them feel good. They went shopping. They exercised. They did self-help. They did everything about themselves to make themselves feel better. And the people in China, they served for 3 months. They did what made others feel good, whether it was doing the dishes. I've had the lab, you guys are about to do the quantum leaps. My other class just finished. And so I just got done reading what each one picked and why and what happened over the 7 days. And it's a game changer. The lab came in the 7th week of spring term. So when I realized we weren't going back to school and none of us really knew, right? Initially, we thought it was just 1 month. And I went into meditation. I didn't know what to do for the next lab. I was totally lost. And I came in and just started writing. And that's where the quantum leap part of your lab, it keeps getting adapted each term a little bit for each class. That's, children, no gratitude, and service. Where the biggest changes for epigenetics, telomeres, And there's the studies on the crystals, the guy in Japan where they made water crystals, and they would put words on the jar. You can Google it. It's pretty awesome. And they would get the most beautiful crystals. So they put words like love, joy, gratitude, or the chanting. They could take the muddiest water and have a group of monks chant over it, and the water would come out the most beautiful crystals. Anyway, did you know, this is kind of cool, that the Earth's magnetic resonance vibrates at the same frequency as our heart rhythms and our brain waves? Something to ponder. Look at that electromagnetic field. It's coming from the planet. The same one's coming from us. And so, allow your imagination to blossom. So that's me doing Qigong. It's a moving meditation. That was my teacher in China. It taught me. This is actually looking in Montana on a peak looking over Yellowstone National Park. And that's what I visualize myself when I'm doing the Qigong. But we should also put a quote from this genius man. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force, and we must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligence mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. It's a book I'm reading now. Highly recommend it. Found it, I shouldn't tell you all this, I found it at Goodwill for $1. Goodwill often has really great books, so people don't realize somebody got it for them or recommended it. And anyway, so you comfortable with chemistry, what we've done, the particles to explain your existence, cations, anions, red and blue oxes, that's down in the redwoods, right? And we have ions and metals and molecules, oh my, diet and drugs as causes and cures, blood pH levels, or if you prefer earth, water, air, fire, and ether, those are particles to explain your existence. So my real question for you is, how comfortable are you with intangible waves, quantum entanglement, string theory, with the infinite potential of giggles and jiggles and wiggles, of butterfly entropy? Yeah, that's a term we gotta get into in 223. And also talking about butterflies, the butterfly, what's that called? Caterpillar goes in the cocoon. There is not a single part of the caterpillar that is part of the butterfly. How is that possible? Anyway, are you comfortable with electromagnetic signaling, consciousness, energy healing, miracles? So there he is, Niels Bohr. Everything we call real is made of things that cannot be regarded as real. If quantum mechanics hasn't profoundly shocked you, you have not understood it yet. Upgrade your belief system to match your vision. So my question is, what is your belief system? You can write about any two things you want to. You can totally disagree. I didn't really say anything. And so what's your boron sulfur? Right? And remember, part of the lab, that's the part you have to start. Hopefully you're already doing that. Could be service, could be gratitude, could be giggles and wiggles, could be G-bombs. And this was a quote. I felt I needed a quote from Albert Einstein. I found this and absolutely loved it. It's the supreme art of the teacher to awaken the joy and creative expression and knowledge. And it has been my supreme joy to create with you this class. So namaste.